stepping into a founder role like you have shift how you relate to responsibility, ultimately to yourself?
Things may not work out. And that has been the most freeing thing in my life.
So well said. And clearly you're someone who practiced this.
The people who win are those who don't give up.
Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. Today, I am joined by Meghan Joyce, co-founder and CEO of Duckbill, an AI-powered personal assistant designed to make everyday life easier while reshaping how work gets done. Duckbill blends generative AI with human expertise, creating smarter support for individuals and new kinds of work through its marketplace. Before Duckbill, Meghan was COO of Oscar Health through its IPO and held senior leadership roles across Uber, leading its largest business. She now teaches at Harvard Business School, serves on multiple boards, and is a sought-after voice on AI, leadership, and the future of work. Meghan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. So I'm very excited about this conversation because as you and I were just chatting before we began, I do not feel like I am very knowledgeable with AI, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. Yeah. A great place for us to start would be your everyday work and life historically that led you here. What is Meghan Joyce's background?
So it honestly started like a lot of other people, which is trying to figure out what to do with my life. This was a question that I kind of held with incredible excitement as a kid growing up. I like to try on different things and imagine myself doing different roles. But the truth was, I kind of woke up in my late 20s, having done stints in consulting and private equity, and realized that for someone who had kind of dreamed about finding a life that they really believed in and were excited to get out of bed in the morning, that was not the life I was leading. And Erin, I know this is probably relates a lot to your experience too. You know, I did an enormous amount of soul searching. I happened to be business school at the time. I actually took a year and a half off to work as a senior policy advisor at the US Treasury, really thinking like it is an entirely different line of work. What's interesting to me, and what I found during that kind of field trip down to Washington, DC, and then a year back at business school, talking to as many people as I could, asking, what do you do all day? Was that the most important thing for me is to ensure that how I am spending those however many 60, 100 hours a week working that I love to do needed to be aligned with my values and my mission. And I had a pretty firm sense of my values. I did not have a firm sense of my mission. But that I knew was going to be the work of the next several years. And over the last 15 years or so, I've worked in a series of tech organizations, having fallen, frankly, into Uber a little bit unexpectedly, even for myself, finding that I can use technology to improve everyday people's lives. And that has been a wildly motivating and inspiring mission that aligns with my values and really feels like the purpose that I am so excited to get up in the morning and pursue every day.
Okay. And I'm so curious about this concept of technology accelerating everything around us and yet still remaining grounded as human beings and, you know, staying connected to our humanity. And so one of the things I would love to maybe ask you now is just how do you look at your understanding of time and attention and intention as you have stepped more and more into this really AI forward business and you're the creator of this business? How do you look at that? How do you look at intention and energy in our humanity as technology is accelerating in our world?
Oh my goodness. Well, I will tell you, you know, I said earlier that I kind of fell into Uber unexpectedly, even for myself. If you had told me when I was in high school or even college that I would have ended up as an executive in a tech company, I probably would have fainted because that just wasn't anything that felt familiar, like part of me. But I actually fell in love with Uber as a rider. riding in the back seat of these vehicles, talking to the humans, the drivers who were sitting in the front seat. I will never forget one of my first Uber rides. One of the drivers told me that he and his best friend had gone in on this car together and were using their proceeds from driving on the Uber platform to put themselves through community college. And I thought this was the most inspiring, beautiful story, living in a city, Boston at the time, where the taxi industry was known for its abuse of its drivers and for taking advantage of them and really not empowering them at all. Seeing how technology could empower these workers. And God knows I didn't always get it right. Uber didn't always get it right. But really, that was why I went to Uber, because I felt for the first time that I could help build something that was using this new technology to empower workers in a way that they had never been before. And at the same time, allow people to access their communities in ways that were unprecedented. It didn't matter where you lived or what you looked like. You could get a ride. You could get a ride. To be so profound. And so all of my work in technology over the last decade and a half has been at the intersection of technology and humanity. After Uber, I went to Oscar Health, where we were using technology to democratize access to really high quality healthcare on the ACA. And after that, I found that some of the technology that I was using at Oscar, I felt would finally unlock this problem that had plagued me for so long, which was how to manage my energy while doing this job that I love. And I found the most energy draining parts of my day were dealing with that ever growing infinite list of life admin, waiting on hold with doctors' offices or debating with customer support whether to get my money back for something that arrived broken or damaged. And I thought, I'm using technology to democratize access to things like rides or healthcare or work even. And surely somebody must be using it to democratize access to help. All these high-powered folks that I knew had help in their lives. And it was what allowed them to maintain their energy to get out every day and drive toward their mission. And I thought that was something we all deserved. And yet it wasn't in me to build a technology company that did not have humanity at its core. And so the heart of Duckbill is not only using technology, AI and other types of technology, to empower people and reclaim not just their time, but their energy for the things that really do light their fire, but to do so through a combination of AI plus humans. Not only because that is truly what is needed in order to give you real leverage in the very unreliable real world we live in, but also that's another way I can use this journey that I'm on to serve humanity and to create jobs in an environment where we're not sure what the economy is going to look like for the millions of people who rely on it.
Right. What I love about what you're doing with Duckbill is that if you think about it, let's just go back like 10 years. And I'm someone who definitely buys into how can we make life more convenient and free up time and energy for ourselves to do more of what matters to us, right? So, for example, I've got a landscaper for 6 months of the year because I live in Chicago. So 6 months of the year, the ground's frozen and you don't need one. But for those other months, I've got someone who does the weekly maintenance on my lawn. Now I like to garden, so I do all that stuff, but there's all the other things that need to happen. And I do that because it is such a peace of mind that it's just one less thing that my husband and I have to manage, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the same with like a home cleaner, right? I've got a team that comes in every 2 weeks and they do their thing. And it's like, that is money so well spent because it's a service that I need that makes my life less hectic, right?
Yep.
So with Duckbill, you're essentially, it's built around supporting people, not replacing people.
You got it.
And so I am curious, what do you think that a lot of leaders in the business world today misunderstand about how AI can show up in everyday work? And where is there maybe like a disconnect where they're thinking too much about it's going to replace too many people and they're getting defensive about it versus how much it can be helpful?
Well, I don't think those fears are entirely misplaced, to be really candid. I think at the advent of any new technology, we, humanity, society, have a set of really large choices to make about how we want this new tool, this new technology to manifest itself in our communities. And those are really daunting questions. And thankfully, we have evidence to show that we've gotten through it with things like the Industrial Revolution, the printing press, the all of the technology around medicine and vaccines and genetic engineering and things like that, which all of which could have had, and in some cases did have, detrimental effects on people and humanity, but ultimately have allowed us to flourish. Now, I believe that the fact that Americans do feel so threatened by AI is a huge problem and opportunity that leaders, not only in the business community, but the policy community, need to confront. AI is wildly powerful, and the nation that leans into it and figures out how to use it for good will be the best off. And by the way, it's not just offensive, there's a defensive aspect of this too around national security. But if the population is worried and rightfully, justifiably worried about how this is going to affect their lives and don't see the kinds of supports that citizens of other countries see, or don't see the kind of hope or vision or future on the other side of this technology, then they are understandably going to be resistant to it. And in my experience, putting a bit of investment into what does that future look like? Do we need stronger supports? Do we need a more optimistic vision that legitimately does work for all? Can be hugely valuable in helping, for lack of a better term, change manage our communities into this new world where they have very real and valid concerns based on what they're looking at on the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah, I tend to believe that there's going to be so much more of a need for people to have a level of self-trust where they're trusting their intuition, they're moving forward in life and not getting so stuck in that defensive side of fear
Yeah.
and reactivity, right? And so when it comes to that, how did stepping into a founder role like you have shift how you relate to responsibility and decision making, ultimately to yourself?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, honestly, one of the greatest gifts that I received at Uber from our founder, Travis, was the ability to be fearless. And I believe strongly that fearlessness is not the absence of fear, it's the willingness to summon your courage and act in the presence of extreme fear. But what we learned at Uber was to actively confront what is the worst thing that could happen, and then proactively decide whether we were willing to live with that future. And again, we did not always get it right. But just that practice of saying, what is the worst that can happen? Am I willing to live with that? If not, what's an off ramp? What are risk mitigants? Allowed me to move forward in the face of fear. And after watching Travis and then Mario and Josh at Oscar and the founders whose boards I've had the privilege of serving on over the last decade operate, I thought I had a good sense of what it took to be a founder and the level of fearlessness required. Well, as any founder can tell you, it was impossible to imagine before I was sitting in this seat. And Erin, I bet like you've experienced some of this building your business and your platform, like really yourself out there challenges you in ways that I had never felt before. But in a way, it's been the most amazing exposure therapy of seeing that, things may not work out. You may get rejected. You may not get it right the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time. And okay, on the other side of that, you're all, and that has been the most freeing thing in my life that has frankly extended into areas well beyond my business, into my personal life. I'm the kind of person who was like the people pleaser, the straight A student for many, many years. And now having been thrown into the deep end of the founder journey, I have built this reservoir of, to your point, kind of self trust and self reliance and courage to summon, even when I'm scared to death, to go for it. And that's been such an extraordinary gift.
Oh, I can relate to that so much. Everything you just said. Yes, the founder journey is the hardest journey, and I mean, even going from working 15-hour days at Goldman Sachs, I'm like, it's kind of almost a cakewalk compared to
Yes,
this.
yes. Erin, I don't.
My husband joined my business last year and he said at one point, like 6 months in, he goes, "You work as much as like a consultant at McKinsey."
Yes,
And I'm
yes.
like, I do. Like it hits different, but I do. Right.
1 million
And
percent.
not, yeah, but also, and this is the next question I'd love to hear your perspective on. You have obviously you have this founder's journey, but you've also been a part of organizations from early growth through IPO. And so what are the inner skills that you have had to develop and really rely upon? Like what's that toolkit that you have of how you can really stay grounded and connected through these moments of really rapid change and ambiguity and uncertainty?
I love this question. And I will tell you, I have to do some kind of self check in periodically to update my rituals because they expire, they fall off, my habits change, or my preferences and needs change. So I will tell you, this is a dynamic thing. But what I have found over the last year and where I am as a founder, as a parent, as a friend, as a citizen, I have really been lacking the space and time to think and building in explicit intentional rituals that give me time to reflect, give me time to think, have been the root of my unlock over and over again. And it is the easiest thing to shift on a calendar because it feels like a nice to have. It feels like something you can skip and pass. And I always regret rescheduling it, deprioritizing it. And when I'm really on the ropes, that is what I come back to is time to think. So for me, what that means today in my life is I do a meditation every morning. And I will tell you, my brain, which is constantly running, needs an active meditation. I cannot sit in silence. And the practical realities of my day, I cannot do it when I first wake up because I have children to get out to school and I have responsibilities. But I do it as early in the day as I can. I try to hold a block of time first thing in my working day that I leave unscheduled for meditation. And I listen to two successive meditations. One is about getting in the right headspace, and one is about setting an intention. And those two things ground me. And I always find new relevance for whatever flavor of the day I'm dealing with in those common questions of getting my thoughts straight and setting an intention for the day. And that ritual alone has carried me so far over the past year.
I love that one. And I'm a big believer of meditation. One of the things I was just talking to someone over a coffee meeting recently about this. And I said, I've had this vision of this new offering that I want to create. And this vision has been a part of my meditations for like 5 years. But it's been further out there in the distance and it's getting closer and closer and closer to who I am in my heart. And it's so funny because people kind of look at you and go, wow, like that's amazing. Everyone is capable of, in their own meditations, grounding themselves, setting the intention, getting more clarity, whatever that is, discovering what is this vision of your future self, creating that vision.
Yes.
Whatever it is, it gets closer and closer to reality the more that you actually do give it the
Yes.
time and the energy to focus on
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
So even 10 minutes a day of intentional meditation means you are focusing on whatever that is you want to intend for your life. If it is clarity, if it is groundedness, if it is some new future self that you're trying to create or a goal you're trying to achieve, it will come into your reality faster when you actually focus.
Exactly. And the hardest
Yeah.
thing I find about those future visions of something you want to create that doesn't exist, whether it's a company that you founded or a platform that you are starting, or even like a future that you want your company or your family to have that doesn't exist today, is always the thing that gets put off for me because it is not urgent. And it's not in my face. It's not the thing that needs to be dealt with immediately. And I think carving out that time and really being intentional about giving it attention is the only thing that allows
Yes,
it to come into being.
100%. So, how have you changed the way that you define success in this chapter of your life? It's different than when you're on the inside, right? And I'm just curious how that's evolved through, these stages of your career.
Yes. Oh, well, I will be completely candid. I want to build a company that has extremely broad impact and touches as many lives as possible and allows all the people who work for us or work on our platform to, appreciate the fruits of their labor. And that is a big, roaring success. And it takes a lot of hours and days put in before you have that roaring success, such that I've needed to kind of break that big roaring success down into smaller bite-sized pieces to give myself the fuel and motivation to keep going. And so I have this intention, to use that phrase again, that is, I am building a company that is changing the world. And that is something that I can come back to on literally an hourly basis, where I say, are we changing the world today? Are we changing the world this hour? And even if that is with a relatively small number of users, even if that is just a profound impact on one person, I can see the impact of that work and labor. And we come back to this as a team all the time. We start our all hands meetings with a celebration of one of our customers and how this platform has impacted their lives, or one of the workers on our platform and how this has enabled them to live a better life. And bringing ourselves back to like, okay, we'll never be as big as we want to be. Our goalposts will always be moving as we build a bigger and bigger and more impactful organization. That is the nature of building and the nature of the human brain. But if I can bring myself back to the impact that we are having in any given moment, that's wildly motivating.
Absolutely. And you also obviously you teach future leaders at Harvard. And so I'm really curious about some of the things that you're really encouraging them to understand about leadership. And maybe are there any of these things that you're encouraging them to learn and to practice that you wish you would have learned
Oh my
earlier?
goodness.
I know I have a million of those because hindsight's always 2020.
My favorite day of the year, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks, I go back to this class that I took when I was at Harvard Business School. At the time, it was about general management, and now they've morphed the class into being about hard decision making, difficult decisions, which is the nature of a leader, a parent, of a human, those difficult decisions. And how do we work ourselves through them? And I come to that class and teach that day's class on the basis of the learnings that I had early in my time as a general manager at Uber, now at this point, 13 years ago. And I find those lessons are still relevant to me today. And two of the most important ones that I will tell you are experimentation is your best friend. If you can find ways to experiment, whether in your business, in your professional life, in your personal life, again, with your relationships and your children and yourself and your meditation journey, whatever it may be, run an experiment. Set it for some discrete amount of time and put a note on your calendar when that discrete amount of time is over for yourself or your team or whoever's relevant to check in on how did it go. And give yourself the choice to keep doing it at that point because, wow, it really is working. Give yourself the choice to pivot, evolve it. If some things are working, but some things need to change. And give yourself the choice to ditch it if it didn't serve you or your business or your life or whatever it was you were experimenting with. And I find that so freeing. If we can, just give ourselves the opportunity to try for some limited amount of time. You're not committing to forever. You're not committing to a permanent one-way door change. You can always undo it. And in fact, you have made a commitment to yourself for a couple of weeks from now or whatever it may be that I'm going to give myself the option to undo it. That I find it allows you to move forward so much faster than you would have otherwise. And then other than experimentation, the other big one is self-forgiveness. Because even the best decision makers I know, the best leaders, the best parents, whoever they may be, only make the right decision. I'm putting this in air quotes, like, I don't know, 60% of the time, which means that 40% of the time we're like, oh, that didn't go exactly as I had hoped or had planned or had dreamed that it would be. And I think that's where experimentation can come in, where it's like, okay, well, it didn't work perfectly. What next? Should I try the thing? Should I try, a 10-degree shift to the left? And forgiving yourself that is part of the learning, part of the journey. And the only thing that I have seen in founding and leading and parenting and friendship and anything else is the people who win are those who don't give up when they fail. 40% of the time that you feel like you didn't get it perfectly, or more, it's like,
oh, so true.
With it. And keep experimenting, keep self-forgiving, and that cycle will make you stronger and stronger.
That is so good. And it's so true. And, what I took away from that is two things. One is give yourself the permission to evolve, to iterate, right? Don't get so stuck in this linear path that you logically think you have all figured out, because life is going to many times show you there's a different way.
Amen.
So that's number one. The second thing I'd say is attachment to outcomes doesn't usually serve you or your team, your family, et cetera. So don't get so attached to the outcome. Instead, keep your eye focused on the goal, but let the goal shift, because sometimes it has to, in order for you to reach the level that you're meant to. And many times, and I see this in so many clients, we don't even know what that is. Yeah. We think we do, but there's something far better waiting for us.
Yes. How many of us, I know I can relate to this myself, wouldn't kind of downsize our dreams because we're afraid of failing. And it's not an explicit thing. It's like this kind of, machine that's running in my brain that I know is meant to protect me, right? But if you really asked me, like, the biggest, boldest dream I could ever think of, like, that's a different thing than many of us often say are our goals for the day or the year or even the decade. And sometimes failing allows you to say, like, what is the real thing that I want? And that's an incredible invitation.
Absolutely. So well put. Let's take this with a couple of our last questions here. I'd love to know, for my audience, it's a lot of leaders and executives in the business world in general. So where would you say that leaders have the greatest responsibility right now in this world where AI is becoming more and more integrated into our daily lives? And clearly, I believe that a lot of people will be looking into Duckbill to help make their daily lives easier. So where's that greatest responsibility that you see at this point for leadership?
Yeah, I think the thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that our future is currently being shaped by a very small number of people who have a particular vision for the future and a particular vision of the role that AI should have in it, and a particular vision of who wins and who doesn't in that AI future. And I think we should not be ceding the future to any small number of individuals. The faster those of us who are privileged enough to be in leadership positions or have a platform and a voice, and by the way, that's every single one of us. Every single one of us is a leader, no matter what our title is or no matter what our role is, because we all have a voice. We have the opportunity to envision a different version of the future and help build toward that reality. And so the future we're building at Duckbill is one where AI relieves you of the things you dread. Go create space for yourself to do more gardening, because Duckbill has helped you find the landscaper. Go take that time for meditation because Duckbill took that PDF of all of your kids' soccer games, which never fall at the exact same time on the exact same day, put that in your family's calendar reliably. Those are the kinds of things that we want to empower people to do through AI, through this beautiful technology that can be used for good. We are also building toward a future where we bring together the best of humanity and technology to create a platform that allows people to work in ways they're excited about. The workers on our platform tell us they love the opportunity to engage with AI. They love the empowerment that comes with saying, I can do work I love from my home or wherever I am to serve people and to bring out the best of my talents and my spirit. That's an incredible thing. And I believe there's a version of our future where we unlock people from this definition of work that has plagued us for so long and actually introduce a better way of working. A little bit more like, call it Etsy for services, where craftsmen, but really craftsmen in services, are finding a place to offer their trade, offer their care, offer their services to other humans in a way that is facilitated by AI in a way that was never possible before. But that's just my vision. And I think one of us out there has the opportunity to paint a similar vision and to help build toward it every day.
That's so beautifully said. I found Sam Altman's blog a few months ago in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. And I was like, why did I go down this rabbit hole? It ended up being like kind of a glim perspective. However, it also did teach me a
Yeah.
lot. And so it wasn't a waste of time. It kind of reset the way that I was looking at certain aspects of AI. And so I do encourage people, to start reading as much as you can on this stuff. It's changing so fast that for one, I know we talked a little bit about, okay, the imposter syndrome around how much you know about AI.
Yes.
I am trying to be more intentional in learning, but not trying to adapt every single tool. Duckbill is going to be one that I've got to really start to incorporate because I am all about things that make my life more efficient.
Erin, we would love that. And we'll share a code so that you and any
That'd be
can
great.
use it to try it out. No harm, no foul. Just give it a shot. And our promise and vision is that through the combination of tech plus humans, we can provide an on-ramping that kind of meets you where you are and asks you, like, what are you dreading? Let's take that off your plate. And through some really special humans and technology, let's show you in real time how this technology can make your life better. And maybe that will give you some inspiration for what a slightly more positive version of the AI future could look like.
That is fantastic. So, Meghan, let's leave my audience with one last perspective from you. What do you want them to know about intention, energy, and or time?
I think there is a common refrain that time is our most limited resource. And maybe this is just me, the half introvert talking, but I actually think that energy is our most limited resource. And that when I am at peak energy, I make such better use of the 24 hours in my day. I make such better use of this precious time that we have. And so the biggest lesson I've learned in life is whatever I can do to manage my energy, whether it's to offload things that I dread that are energy draining, that is the whole purpose of Duckbill. For people to do that and make it possible and affordable. And to lean into the things that give me energy, whether that's building a business I love or spending time with the people in my life that give me that spark, or gardening or meditating, whatever it may be. I show up in ways that help me feel like I have 100 hours in the day before I ever thought that that was even remotely possible. And I would encourage everybody to try an experiment today that they can use to lean into that energy and make the most of it and see what it does for their life.
Absolutely. I feel like you just did a plug for my book. Thank you.
I'm such a huge fan of what you're doing, Erin. It's amazing.
It's so well said. And clearly you're someone who practiced this. this, because you can't speak about it that eloquently if it's not actually a part of your daily life. So thank you for sharing your perspectives on it. Let's leave them with, where can they learn more about Duckbill?
Please go to getduckbill.com. We would be so honored to serve you and help make the most of your energy. Take those energy draining things that you dread and get them done without having to worry about it, and give you back that energy for what really drives you.
Oh, so helpful for working parents too. So thank you for sharing that. We will include all of the links on where you can find more about Meghan and Duckbill. And until next time, thank you so much. And Meghan, we appreciate you being
Thanks
here.
for having me, Erin.